Here is the full story of how World War II ended in Europe in April 1945. World War II, which began on September 1, 1939 with the German invasion of Poland, became one of the most brutal conflicts in human history. Nazi Germany under the leadership of Adolf Hitler managed to conquer most of Europe in the early 1940s. However, since 1943, the Axis powers, especially Germany, began to be pushed back by the advance of the Allies. In early 1945, the Western Allies led by the United States, Britain, and France moved into German territory from the west, while the Soviet Union attacked from the east. The city of Berlin, the capital of Nazi Germany, became the final and symbolic target of the long struggle. On April 16, 1945, the Soviet Union launched Operation Berlin Offensive, a massive attack from the east. The Red Army fought fiercely against German troops who were defending Berlin desperately. Meanwhile, American and British troops had managed to cross the Rhine River and approach the western part of the city. Inside Berlin, the atmosphere was full of chaos. Civilians were terrified, underground bunkers were crowded, and buildings collapsed everywhere due to air and artillery attacks. But Hitler remained in the Führer bunker, his underground headquarters in the center of Berlin. On April 30, 1945, realizing that defeat was inevitable and reluctant to be captured alive by the enemy, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker with his lover whom he had just married the day before, Eva Braun. They were found by his staff. Their bodies were burned on Hitler's own orders, to avoid being humiliated by the enemy as happened to Benito Mussolini in Italy. After Hitler's death, Nazi power began to collapse rapidly. The German government was briefly controlled by Admiral Karl Donitz, who tried to negotiate with the Allies. On May 7, 1945, Germany signed an act of unconditional surrender in the city of Reims, France. However, because the Soviet Union wanted the surrender ceremony to be held in territory they controlled, on May 8, 1945, the surrender ceremony was repeated in Berlin. This date was later known as Victory in Europe Day. However, for the Soviet Union, this celebration was held on May 9, due to time zone differences. Therefore, Russia and several former Soviet Union countries still commemorate Victory Day on that date. The end of the war in Europe did not immediately end World War II, because the war was still raging in the Pacific between the Allies and the Empire of Japan. However, the collapse of Nazi Germany was a turning point in world history. Millions of lives were lost, Europe was destroyed, and the world witnessed the darkest impact of extreme ideology. After the war, the world witnessed the breakup of Germany into Allied and Soviet-occupied territories, the Cold War between the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc, the establishment of the UN, United Nations, to prevent another major war from happening, the Nuremberg trials, where Nazi leaders were tried for war crimes and genocide.